I'd like to call to order the April 15, 2019 meeting of the Highland Park Board of Education. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of the public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, the Highland Park Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting, setting forth the time, date, and location to be submitted for publication to the Home News Tribune and Star Ledger and posted on the board's website at least 48 hours in advance of this meeting. Members of the public who wish to address the board will be given the opportunity to do so before the board adjourns for the evening. Linda, can we please have a roll call?
Ms. Byer?
Here.
Ms. Cimaresti?
Here.
Ms. Coleman?
Here.
Ms. Gowan?
Here.
Mr. Krieger?
Here.
Mr. Magaziner?
Here.
Ms. McFadden DiNicola? Mr. Wislevich? Mr. Whiten?
Be it resolved, pursuant to the Sunshine Act, NJSA 10-4-12 and 13, the Highland Park Board of Education will now meet in closed session to discuss personnel matters, HIB reports, and discipline. These exemptions are permitted to be discussed in closed session in accordance with NJSA 10-4-13. Information regarding the board's closed session discussion will be disclosed to the public as soon as the need for confidentiality no longer exists. Can I get a motion to convene to closed session?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, if we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance over here to my right.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Highland, are there any communications other than what we have on the agenda? Or we have nothing on the agenda?
Nothing on the
Okay. And then we have on the agenda the approval of the minutes, or to approve for, at our next meeting, approve the minutes from the public workshop and executive session meetings on March 18th, 2019, and the regular public and executive session meetings on March 25th, 2019. Does anybody have a chance to look at those? Have any questions or concerns? Huh? Huh? Oh, they're not posted yet? All right, never mind. You didn't get a chance to look at them. All right, so we will move on to our student representative report. Good evening, students.
Good evening. For Irving, sorry, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. For Irving, the preschoolers at Irving started their soil projects by mixing fertilizer last week. This month, students and teachers are working to promote autism awareness and advocate for an inclusive setting as a part of Autism Awareness Month. For Bartle had an NJSLA meeting for ELA and math all day today. Bartle is also having a book club meeting this Wednesday, followed by a half-day Thursday, along with high school as well, and more meetings on the 22nd and 29th. For the middle school, spring sports started last month on the 22nd. There's an away game for girls volleyball this Wednesday. We wish the volleyball team the best of luck. On the 25th, the middle school is hosting an open wash, open hearts Thursday from 6 to 9. Finally, on the 30th, the sixth grade is going on a class trip to Adventure Aquarium.
And for the high school, March 29th to 31st were the 3 performances of Legally Blonde. The cast and crew put on an amazing show with live dogs and tons of fun and music. The third marking period's ended recently, and report cards are coming out this Thursday, and this week is also testing Park. HPHS is hosting a prom dress exchange for kids to get good offers on dresses. Thursday is a half day with DECA hosting a Play 60 event for the students to enjoy a field day outside instead of boring classes inside on the last day before the break. This week is also our second Spirit Week, an initiative that Student Congress put together this year to increase the spirit in our school. Monday is Pajama Day, Tuesday's Meme Day, Wednesday's Culture Day, Thursday's Color Wars. We also have the game Sneaky Cards going around the grade levels as a competition, and the pep rally Thursday will be hosted by Utechi and Miss Stefan. And on April 8th and April 9th, baseball won against Dunellen. April 9th, boys tennis won against Colonia. April 10th, boys tennis won against Piscataway. And April 16th, there will be a baseball game against Bishop Arc. April 17th, softball against New Brunswick. April 17th, away boys tennis against East Brunswick. And April 18th, boys tennis home against Monroe. April 18th, softball at Dunellen. And finally, congratulations to the Model Congress team for winning Outstanding Large Delegation at the Rutgers Model Congress Conference, and for all the individual delegations that won.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Scott, I think we're on to you.
So I am going to ask that Susie Budine, our Director of Educational Services, come to the podium, or would you like to use my wireless mic? All right. The board and I asked Susie to come tonight to speak about a program that we are considering introducing to the Bartle School. Big one. And then that bottom one goes back. The Therapeutic Support Program would be implemented at Bartle School for students who we would retain in district and support. These are students who we would otherwise have to send out of district because we don't have those services in place right now. And potentially also bring back students from out of district who are receiving these support services outside of Highland Park. We're not fully committed to the program yet. We're still examining how the budget will continue to progress between now and the final presentation, which is May 6th. But I do want Susie to share with the board and the community what the program is in case we move forward with it. Susie?
Thank you. So in my State of Special Ed, we discussed this program very briefly, and I know there were questions about some more detail. So we wanted to make sure that we came back to the table and kind of had those discussions as we're moving in that direction to make a decision whether or not to do this. So the mission of the program really would be to work in collaboration with Rutgers University Behavioral Healthcare, or UBHC, to provide a program that gives our students the therapeutic supports and services that they need, and also to support their families so that we can increase their ability to mainstream into their home, school, and community in a least restrictive environment. So what the framework of that would look like, a little more detail, is that it would have a comprehensive positive behavior system for the entire class, for all the students in the classroom, as well as individualized behavioral interventions and supports as needed for individual students. The classroom staff would have a very high level of training to address the various needs in the classroom. It would also have a higher staff-to-student ratio than you would normally see in a resource room or something like that. And there would also be clinical counseling and therapies available in individual, group, and family, supports to support both the students and their families. It would include psychoeducation interventions, and that's basically to help students adjust to their new environment and to work on developing some coping skills. Psychiatric care, coordinated services between the home and school, ongoing training for all of our staff that are working with these students to help meet their needs, and then access to a full continuum of outside resources that UBHC would offer. So our next steps at this point really is to start to take a look at whether or not we're able to move forward with this program. So the child study team, the administration, and the superintendent are working together to consider different aspects, such as what students might be appropriate, where would the program be housed. It would be at Bartle, but we would need a classroom and also a therapy office space, so we would need to look at that. Which staff would work in the program, what's the cost of partnering with UBHC, as well as setting up the classroom, all of the training that would be needed, all those different components. So those are the pieces that we'll be looking at to make a decision about whether or not to move forward with the program. And that's the rundown. You have questions?
I just want to pose questions.
There's an extra mic there. Does anybody have any specific questions for Susie?
Thank you. Yeah, I have a quick question. When you began to evaluate this, did you have in mind for, let's say, the coming year, or even if it's pushed forward, how many kids we would be wanting to able to handle, expecting to handle, and whether there's room for growth if we did it?
The UBHC framework maxes the class out at 8 students. So it would be a maximum of 8 students. We could potentially run into a situation like, let's say late in the year, we have a student that comes into district that would be appropriate for that program, and we might carry a 9th student for the last month or 2 of school, but it's really intended to max at 8. Right now, we think that we may potentially have 6 students appropriate for the program, so that we wouldn't start at max. We would start with a manageable number and then build from there.
And would those be students that currently are being sent out of the district, or are they in the district?
Some are, some aren't. So some are already in out-of-district placements, some are currently in district. So it's a little bit of both.
Thanks.
Pleasure.
I was just going to ask about the students that are already out of district. How would it work with getting them to come back?
So if we do decide to move forward with the program, it's a pretty comprehensive look at how we move from where we are today to where we want to be in September with the students returning to district. So it would begin with a lot of conversations with families, bringing them up to speed on the program, what the program looks like, what services are offered, how it compares to what they're receiving in an out-of-district placement. And then we would work to put together a very comprehensive, individualized transition plan that would bring the students from their out-of-district placement back to district. Now, what that looks like for one student may be very different from what it looks like for another student. For example, some of our students are in the UBHC program currently, so transitioning back to district is less of a transition because the framework is exactly the same. We're basically taking the framework and all the services from the out-of-district UBHC program and transplanting it in district. So it would be less of a transition because a lot of that remains the same for the students versus another student who's in an out-of-district placement in a different school that has a completely different framework, and we would want to look at how we could really build a system in place for them to bring them back so that they can be successful. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
So I know that one of the questions is like how much it will cost, but is there like a projected or an estimated amount that it would cost right now, or?
I don't have those numbers to be able to give this evening. There's a lot of different components wrapped up in that, so I don't have those numbers for you this evening.
And in terms of the amount of time that the students in that particular program would spend in that classroom versus pushed into general ed classrooms, how would that typically work with a program like that?
So again, that's different for different students. So some students may need to be in this particular classroom more than others, where some students may be ready to push out into a gen ed setting before others. But what UBHC and I have discussed is making sure that we start out with being sure that there's opportunities for all of our students to push out into gen ed settings, making sure that they're having lunch with their peers, having recess with their peers, taking a look at specials. If we have a student who does really well in a particular subject area, can we work on having those students in that setting with an overlay of behavioral support that's supported through, all of the different therapies and whatnot that go with the existing program. So one student's profile for that may be completely different. That's very similar to, say, our ABA classrooms or like our GLOW program. It's the same kind of thing. What one student's profile and program look like for that is very different from another based on their particular needs.
And then my follow-up question would be similar to that. How would that look for some of the students as they move up to the middle school? Is it conceivable that there'd be components of that program that for individual students moving up to the middle school, if they still needed some sort of supports, there could be some sort of mini version of what they were receiving at the Bartle program once they move to the middle school, so you don't go from this intensive program to
nothing.
Middle school.
What I can tell you is that we're a little far removed from that because this particular program right now is a 2nd through 4th grade window. So we're 2 years away from that at the earliest. So that's something that if we get the program up and running, something that over the next year to 2 years we'll be taking a look at what does that look like. What I can tell you is that the program is designed in a manner not for the students to remain in that intensive setting long term. It's intended for the students to get intensive services up front, get them stabilized, get them where they need to be, and then move them out of the program. So they're not anticipated to remain in that program until they graduate. It's really kind of a short-term window. So we would have to look at that as we get closer to students being ready to move up to the middle school. Where are they at? What supports do they need? But it's also intended to take the students on a gradual release from the program so they don't just go from being there to not being there. They have everything and then they have nothing. So there's a fading of supports to help the student transition out of the program and into a full-time mainstream setting.
Makes sense. So the classroom itself would be ungraded. It would be a 2nd through 4th
It's a 2nd
grade.
through 4th. So of the students we're currently looking at, some are 2nd grade, some are 3rd grade, some are 4th grade. So it would just depend on their grade level. So they would do a lot of like small center work and different things like that to keep them on their grade level, even though there's multiple grades working in the classroom. And then they would also do whole group work that kind of spans across all 3 grades.
And I'm assuming there's similar programs to that UBHC
Even
has
our resource rooms
implemented.
right now are like that. Our GLOW programs like that. Our ABA classrooms are like that right now. So yeah.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Anybody else have any specific questions for Susie? No? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Susie. You can head out. I'll see you in the morning. Oh, no, that I'll take. So just a reminder to those who were here March 18th when I presented the preliminary budget, the intent tonight in having Susie come out is to talk about something that we feel could be a cost benefit to us. If we don't feel it's a cost benefit, we won't move forward with it. The other thing I'd like to share with the board and the community is another highlight or a relatively unique program that we're building into the budget that would have us provide laptops to all of our teachers and Chromebooks for all of our middle and high school students. It's a one-to-one initiative. At first glance, it may appear like we're having to spend additional money to purchase this equipment, but in fact, we would actually be saving money in the short term and the long term by going with this lease initiative. Every year, we budget money to replace Chromebooks, to purchase additional laptops for teachers, to buy spare parts. Sometimes we have students' IEPs that require us to buy them computer equipment. This initiative would allow us to do all of that, and in addition, address the opportunity gap that this board and I have talked about for quite a while, several years, giving machines to those students who don't have anything when they return home, except maybe their mobile device. Truly at a deficit compared to their peers when we as a faculty try to help them better understand and learn 21st century technology. So just want to share a couple of talking points with you on the screen. First of all, what we're looking to do is to lease, not purchase, these Chromebooks. That's how we're able to do this cost effectively. We feel $950 would be enough to cover all of our needs, which would include students in middle and high school and all of our teachers district-wide. The district-wide teacher initiative would have us providing laptops, not Chromebooks, to the faculty. We are looking at a September rollout, but it all depends on how effective we are in upgrading our infrastructure to accommodate what would be new demand on our network. Those upgrades are going to happen over the summer. If they can happen as soon as through the summer, then we will go with the rollout in September. Part of the lease package that we're examining would incorporate insurance for the devices. And also know that we are looking closely at how we would make sure everybody is surfing the web safely and appropriately by using a new filter, which we call Rocket for Education. Not much more to really share with you yet, but obviously as information becomes available, and if the initiative is officially approved within our budget come May 6th, we'll start getting the wheels turning ASAP, and then and reach out to everyone. But again, I need to impress upon the board and the community that this is a cost savings as well as addressing a major need that we have, and that is to provide all of our students equal opportunity to be able to use a 21st century device. Now, are there any questions that I hope I can answer now, and if not, I can get back to the board?
It's always good, Zayu, to check with me before you jump on the mic, okay?
Oh, sorry.
Specifically about the one-to-one initiative, is that what you're asking questions about?
Yeah.
So when you're saying that it looks like it could be on par with what we're already spending, is that factoring in the infrastructure improvements that have to be
Correct. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Linda, we're rolling in some of the infrastructure equipment into that lease program?
Because I know that continuously, even where we're at, 1.5 or 2 to 1 right now in the high school, and we continuously get complaints that not everyone can get online, not everyone can do anything. So
the intent would be to upgrade all the wireless access devices in the middle and the high school, take the current devices, which are not able to handle the bandwidth and the network capacity that we need, and move them down to Irving and Bartle, where the internet is not used quite as much as it is here up in the middle and high school. That's all rolled into the lease program. Still, it would be, in next fiscal year, less costly than what we were intending on doing for infrastructure upgrades and computer technology.
I could answer some of that. A lot of the network improvements are being done out of capital, So it's not really in the expenditure budgets.
So
And it's
you
also
didn't
being
use
done
it
with the
to-
help, it's being done with the help of some state money that we would otherwise lose.
So are you saying that the capital expense wasn't used as part of the comparison between what we're spending now on our Chromebooks that we have, or that it was included as part of the comparison? in terms of
When
cost?
we compared in the Finance Committee the costs year to year, the network improvements were done completely separately, and they were done out of the, I've forgotten the name of which capital improvement plan, but it was done out of the capital improvement plan, and it is not something that we, as part of the 2% cap or as part of the day-to-day expenditures. And it would have been done independent of the lease. In fact, it was planned independently and before the lease. So
But
they're
is it-
independent programs.
Is it planned at the same level where right now, where we have 2-to-1 in the high school, and we're going to 1-to-1, were we planning to go to 1-to-1 over the last couple of years?
Yes, we were planning to have it available so that everyone could have a computer when we did the upgrade on the network. Otherwise, it'd be insane. I mean,
Wait, so we were planning on the upgrades to go to 1-to-1 before we proposed 1-to-1
yes,
computers?
yes. And the point of that is the equipment now is so much better. It's better than 1-to-1. You could have 100 or 1,000 other people walk in who aren't part of the school, and in principle, the equipment should be able to handle that. So it wasn't that we said, so we have now, 2-to-1 doesn't even work, or 1-to-2 doesn't even work. We want to go to 1-to-1. It's rather we want to get modern equipment that can handle a load, a serious load, out of capital, not out of annual expenditures that go to salaries and insurance and books and everything else. And we need to make that network improvement because the network is so bad now, and the equipment, 5 or 10 years later that we could have now is so much better.
And 5 and 10 years later, it'll be that much better too, rather than right now.
Correct.
Right, but I want to clarify, because I feel like you're trying to trick Mark into saying something that he's not saying. Like, the finance committee or the board wasn't planning to networking for a 1-to-1 initiative before we brought up a 1-to-1 initiative.
Correct. We did not plan it for that.
But I feel like that's kind of how
They're
Rob was
completely
posing the
independently.
question to make it sound that way.
Yeah,
which
no,
is-
they're completely,
That way independent.
Yes, I just want to make sure that
completely
that's...
independently.
Yes.
Because the network was so old and so poor.
And I would say that part of the issue is not just the computers, it's all the kids on their devices. I'm sitting here looking at Wi-Fi password students, 2019. I don't know that the computers are really even the issue with the Wi-Fi. It's everybody on their devices. And,
Correct.
So this isn't really about a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1 or a what. The way that we came to this was as an equity issue. We had identified that we have students that are being assigned homework that require devices. They don't have devices, they don't have Wi-Fi, and we've been trying 9 different ways to solve for that problem. This seemed like the easiest way to solve that problem.
And
then-
cheaper in the budget.
It
Correct.
sounds easier, but I'm not convinced that we looked at other alternatives. Do we know what the equity issue is? Like how many students are we looking for?
We did all those, we did do that. We surveyed the students, Scott has those numbers. I'm convinced, I'm sorry you're not convinced, but anything you need to convince you, please ask us for it, and
Yeah,
we'll
I'm just
resend
wondering
to you whatever data you feel like you need.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there was like a much smaller lease program that could be done for the students that are in that situation, rather than looking at a 1-to-1 across all the students, looking at, maintaining where we're at 2 or 1.5.
So I think Mark's been pretty clear about this multiple times. This will be replacing, instead of purchasing ones that are going to go around on carts, where we've had multiple teachers come to us and say, I can't get a cart, I can't do this, I want to do this, I can't do that. There's numerous problems that we're solving for. So
I just want to also remind everybody that we had a central leadership team comprised of HPEA members, board members, and administration as well, meet several times to flesh this all out. So there was a stakeholder group too. I don't want you to think it was done in isolation.
No, I know this has come up a lot. I remember it being proposed years ago to get all the students on computers so they could be quieter in the classroom, or they could be on
what? I
computers
don't
so
ever
that-
remember students quieter in a classroom being a goal. I don't know where you're getting that from.
I mean, the problem is that students can't do their homework. We have a whole segment of students that only have mobile devices or have nothing, or have mobile devices with a limited data plan that belongs to the whole family.
And it's certainly not for the tests. I mean, we don't
And
even
the
know what the
homework-
next test is going to be.
And the
right
homework
now.
is being assigned, they just can't do it, or they have to do it piecemeal, go to a friend's house, go to the library for a little while, 30 minutes.
Also, Rob,
But
as a-
I
as
hear you
an ex-
asking, can I
Oh, go
finish
ahead.
up something?
Yep.
I mean, I hear you asking, couldn't we just get leased computers for the kids who don't have them? I mean, is that a possibility? I don't know the answer to
Well,
that.
as an equity issue, that does go, so as an equity issue, if we give every student the exact same computer, then that resolves that issue.
And I do want to add to that, that it didn't come out of the Finance Committee, as Darcy said. This came out of the Policy Committee discussing the homework issue, and it came from the teachers who were concerned about having, some people have laptops that don't work, some people have to bring machines from home, and this solves both of those problems, which the Policy Committee and the board as a whole, I would say, really cares about in terms of equity. So this is the best we can do, but in the budget, this saves us money. In the annual budget, this saves us money over the last 5 years of what we've spent each year.
Looked at from equity, if you just throw the same resources at every student, I don't know that this necessarily does it, because not every student needs the same resources. It makes it equal for one component of what a lot of other students have, where a lot of other students have computers. So you give everyone a computer, but that doesn't necessarily make it equitable, because not every student has the same resources at home. Not every student has two parents at home or one parent who doesn't.
Of course, Rob, we're not
We
pretending
can
this
always-
solves all problems. We're trying to solve this one particular problem so that students have the opportunity to do homework that is assigned, and we don't have to ask, because what was being bandied about in the Policy Committee was okay, well, we just don't assign any kind of homework that requires a computer, and that's
Or
just
teachers
not
do
practical.
Or teachers do both. They always
Right.
provide a paper copy
Right.
and a paper
Right, so
version
we're
of the assignment.
doubling up work for staff, which we don't want to do either. So if Rob, I feel like we're going down a rabbit hole a bit. So if you have really specific questions about this program, can you go to Scott and to Mark maybe? And
Sure.
then
So
if there's
the
something
next
that we can't
question would
resolve
be-
for you, then we'll come back to the table with it?
So the next question would be, have we looked at professional development for the teachers so we can actually implement this plan? Is the plan really just hand everyone a computer that is on a lease so we can save some money over the long term on our Chromebooks, move the other Chromebooks that we have down to Bartle and Irving, and then improve our infrastructure? But are we looked at how would be implemented across all the different classes, whether or not our curriculum is set up for the Chromebooks, whether or not we need to add professional development, and whether or not we're actually ready to move to a one-to-one.
Well, I'm sure teachers
this
could
rate.
attest to the fact that they've gotten, I'm sure, plenty of professional development over the years on Google Chrome apps or whatever. They're all kind of shaking their heads. It's not like we are going from no computers to a one-to-one. And I mean, I'll say my intention is not our kids are on the computer all the time. I hope our curriculum doesn't change a whole heck of a lot. My goal isn't that our kids are on computer screens, and I think any teacher out there is nodding. That's not the goal. We're not saying now we're an all digital district. Everything we do, we throw out all the paper, we throw out all the pencils, everything's on a computer now. Heck no. So we have an equal playing field in the classroom and when the kid walks out the door. To the point that we can provide that. Of course, we can't provide two parents for every kid. But to the extent that we can, we're just trying to level the playing field, and we can do it cheaper than what we've been doing by trying to piece together carts. It seems like a no-brainer. So again, if you have additional questions, please go to Scott, go to Mark.
And Scott could answer the questions, perhaps initially privately, but perhaps to the whole board, with Christina Nicosia, who's going to be managing the rollout and managing the discussions with the teachers about using the equipment. And I would say that the Policy and Finance Committees are pretty well proud of being able to do this, save the district money, and get every student from 6 to 12 a Chromebook. And I call it equaling the playing field with places like Edison and Kendall Park and other districts and South Brunswick, where every student also has a one-to-one. In the sense we're behind. So I think it's a good thing we're doing.
And the staff as well.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out one thing, is that students that go home with other siblings, they could have a family computer to use, but they might not have their own. So I think that it helps in ways that we haven't yet really discovered. Families that have, two different households that they live in, where they live with mom here and they live with dad here, their computer comes with them. So that, to me, was kind of, for me anyway, it feels like that's a really big benefit. And there's probably lots of other benefits that we haven't thought of or seen yet.
Could I just clarifying question? The money in, I think we talked about this before, the money in the capital account that's going to infrastructure, and that, is some of the capital money also going for the lease, or is the lease,
No.
okay, I see,
No,
I see. The capital money that goes to the network improvements, that's not something we can just take out of there and purchase and hire a bunch of new teachers?
No, we cannot.
We cannot do that?
It's not,
Okay.
it's not
They're
towards,
not interchangeable?
they are not interchangeable. It's not towards this year's working budget.
Okay.
It's not towards what we have a 2% cap on. It's not towards that constraint. It's for capital equipment and capital improvements. And we are going to put forward a budget which will have capital improvements, which are for network equipment, roof repairs, possibly a small part of the track out there, if we can get the county and the borough to share that with us. And that's all been put into the budget. But it's all capital. It is not working day-to-day budget.
So we can't just say, we want to, hire 10 more paras, let's go into the capital budget and take it
Cannot
out?
do that.
We cannot do that?
Cannot do that.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Can
I just ask
Saeed, did you? Sorry.
a quick
Oh,
question?
Hold on a second.
Sorry, about the maintenance of the computers. Once we have them, is that part of the lease as well?
There'll be insurance, and we will have our own staff to do maintenance. But if a piece of equipment that becomes unusable, we can go to insurance for that. Or if equipment is stolen or lost, the insurance will cover some or all of that.
Is the district paying the insurance or the students?
There's going to be some combination of that. We will take the bulk of the insurance, but we will offer families additional insurance. That's and it's optional. I said the word, offering, it's optional. There's a kind of a template that's used by a lot of districts in the state now. It's one of the reasons we waited. We talked about this 4 years ago when I first joined this board. There was no template. Hoboken bought computers and they ended up in closets, never used. Right. But now we do have districts like Edison next door that every student in that whole district gets a one-to-one leased computer. And they have really well thought out sets of insurance policies, regulations, documents that parents have to sign saying that they'll do their best to keep the equipment safe and not ruined and so on. And Christina knows about that because her last district before here did that. So she's planning to use templates that are readily available for all those kinds of items.
Okay, thanks.
Just giving every student a Chromebook wouldn't really solve an issue if they don't have Wi-Fi access at home. And so, in order to pay for all their...
Just before you go, Dr. Nicosia does have a solution for that, and there is a way that she and John, I think, John's nodding, that they can configure the Chromebooks so that students can work on them at home without Wi-Fi. So they wouldn't be able to obviously collaborate, but they can still do the word processing, do anything they need to do their own individual work.
But that's not the only way that we use the Chromebooks. It's not just for typing. We also do stuff like use online textbooks. We also use different programs for programming, just a bunch of different websites like research and everything. They wouldn't be able to access those.
Correct.
But we are also going to be opening up time after school, so for students who do need that access, there will be additional time after school in the library until, I think, 5 o'clock, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But if there is access until 5 o'clock, why don't they just use the school's computers? Why do they have to have their own device?
because people do homework after 5 o'clock, especially people who are involved in sports and after-school things. I mean, it's not perfect. We'd like to buy everybody a router, and we researched a whole bunch of ways we might be able to do that for lower-income students, and none of them panned out. None of them were affordable. They all turned out to be sort of cheaper than a normal router, but not that much cheaper. A router plus service. So the idea is that Dr. Nicosia is going to be training the teachers and the students in how to download enough content that they can do most of the stuff offline. So that includes, it's going to have to include things like I'm not sure what programming language you're using, but some of those things can be downloaded to be used offline. It's not ideal, but they can be.
We've also been talking about reaching out to local businesses that provide Wi-Fi, like Dunkin' Donuts and Stop and Shop, and see if they want to partner with the district. Apparently, the Madison School District, which is the last district in which Dr. Nicosia worked, did something like this in Madison. So we might try to swing something like that as well.
But if I remember correctly, previous meetings, the point of doing this is so that kids who might have to work after school or don't have the time to come right after school would be able to use it at home. And forcing them to go to Dunkin' when they might have to babysit while doing homework or something like that might not be an ideal solution for this. So instead, I don't feel like this just giving every kid a Chromebook would solve the issue.
Well, I'll just say
It doesn't solve
Nothing's going
the
to
problem.
solve every equity issue.
But I'll say this, seems to be some of the more common apps that are used are slides, docs, right, and sheets. Those are all offline available.
But to get those pictures you need for slides and stuff, you have to Google them and you have to use the internet for them.
Yeah, well, you know what, my partners here are saying, it's just going to be something we have to move forward with.
And teachers, I assume, we're going to be cognizant of the fact that, the majority of homework that's due the next day is going to have to be downloadable. It's going to have to be downloadable. Teachers aren't going to be able to assign something that requires online research that's due the next day with only, 12 hours, 24 hours for the student to do it. I mean, I think that's right, Scott? There's going to have to be recognition that not everybody has Wi-Fi every night, and that will be made clear to teachers. It's a limitation. It really stinks. We'd like to have Wi-Fi for everybody.
Where we were.
Right. It's a big, big improvement.
I still don't feel that there's a need to give every single student, I have my own laptop, I don't need a Chromebook. Avery has their own laptop. Usually in my classes, half of the people take out their own device without needing a school borrowed Chromebook. So taking out a loan of leasing 950 Chromebooks for 2 schools seems excessive and a waste of the budget money. So is there a way to, with the survey that was done, if we saw how many people don't have their own personal device at home, then if we based it off that number instead and maybe added 100 to
How do we choose which people to give it to? And we are saving money in the budget by doing this lease program. So to us, it made very little sense when we're saving money to try to pick and choose students. You get one, you don't get, you want one, but we've seen that you carry one in occasionally, so you can't have one. That just seemed to make no sense, and no other school district in the state does anything like that. You either lease them or you don't lease them, or if you're very rich, you buy them. But we can't solve all the world's problems here. So we can't get internet, we can't buy internet for all of Highland Park. I'd like to do that, we discussed that. We can't do it. So we're doing with very limited resources, and frankly, a very, very disastrous budget based mostly on state aid and costs going up. We're doing the very best we can and even saving money in this budget by doing it.
Leasing 850 versus 950 Chromebooks, 850 would probably still save, even if it's only $100, you can use that to fund an instrument for the band program or something like that.
But you're also going to have a person, a staff person who's going to be okay, I'm going to do the analysis, figure out who doesn't have a computer, who does have a computer, who's entitled to one. I'm going to check out all the computers, make sure you have one. That's staff hours. That's a lot of staff hours.
If we do another survey for kids, asking the entire school,
we only got 50% of the surveys back, and of those surveys, the information we got back was very, very bad, meaning many, many students didn't have equipment. So it seemed to us 50% we don't know, 50% we know. The numbers that are coming back look like many students don't have support, and it just seemed much simpler, especially the staff costs. Going out and hiring even a part-time person to monitor the equipment, who has it, who doesn't, is more expensive than just leasing for everyone. So there's
And
those
it's not
kinds
going to
of
be a big
costs
problem if we
involved.
have a few extras for breakage or for whatever.
Can I ask a question about that? So with this program, do you have to take one? Because in some districts, I know parents who don't need one, the children who don't need one can just sign a
The
form.
caveat, I can answer that, Mark.
The forms that I saw from Edison, if you choose not to sign those, they will not force you to take a machine. I would defer to Dr. Nicosia.
Those students will not be allowed access onto our internet.
That becomes
network.
the issue.
Wait, what? I don't understand.
Can't they have their own computer and use our internet?
Your question relates to what we do with students who don't want the Chromebook, correct?
Right.
So
To take home.
we've
So-
secured our network going into next year so that only those Chromebooks will have access, if you're a student, to the network. So if a student in school, it's sort of an encouragement and enticement for them, one, to use the Chromebook, and two, to make sure that we're securing our network, then they'll have to use one of our Chromebooks. So if a student decides that, hey, I want to use my MacBook Air, that student could bring the MacBook Air in, but will not have access to the internet network.
So phones will
That's
no
the
longer have
proposal.
access to Wi-Fi?
I'm sorry?
So students' phones will no longer have access to Wi-Fi, is that correct?
Will not.
That might be a good idea. My students are,
not
my
sure.
own children are not going to be very excited about that, but I
There actually has.
I see nods in the audience.
cautiously excited.
Nods and thumbs up.
Excuse me, I'm not sure of the details of this. So, I mean, I expect bringing my own laptop here. I can use it when I sign in as myself, but not with the student ID. Student wants to bring a Mac to school and has their own ID on their own Mac. They can get on the internet. We're not going to stop them. It's
thought
with
we
their
were.
student ID going on a student piece of equipment. They'll need our Chromebook with that student ID.
So I can't log on as Ann Gowan at students.hpschools.net on my MacBook. I have to.
Correct.
I can only use that login.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
It might be a slightly incorrect understanding,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we haven't fleshed all of this out yet.
And I
But-
think
and
I think one
really
of the things
Dr.
we're waiting
Nicolia's-
on is May
Yeah.
6th. We're not making any final decisions on any of these initiatives, including what Susie just talked about, until
Yes.
we resolve the budget.
Yes.
So after May 6th, we can flesh this out even more with the
And
full
we're
board if you'd like.
still trying to find money.
So I'm all for it. My question really was whether or not, because there's are questions about, do I have to take one home? And typically, no, that's not a requirement, but now you're bringing up.
I'll have Dr. Nicosia come to one of our board
I don't
meetings.
think you have to take it home. You can leave it in a locker here or wherever you want, or carry it back and forth and not use it at home. But I think Dr. Nicosia needs to answer some of the detailed questions.
I just wanted to highlight for Zayu that the money, if it doesn't go towards this, cannot be used for instruments. That's not a capital, right? That's not a capital.
Well, this isn't capital.
this
The
isn't
computers aren't capital.
Only the
No,
network.
I'm just saying I'm sorry, the network.
Oh, the
money.
network's another story.
So he had suggested that we not do that and then use that money towards instruments. And I just wanted to point out that we talked
No,
about
we
that.
could-
No, I
earlier.
think he's talking about the computers.
The computers.
And
We
the
could
computers
use-
are, the computers isn't coming out of capital.
I
That's
think
coming out of.
to be fair, we evaluated that, buying 400 instead of 850, and saving $10,000 or $20,000. It seemed to us that while that's saving so much money, and giving everyone a machine and not having someone have to count wasn't, which would have cost us more than the savings, just didn't make sense.
I think
we spent a
counting
lot
would-
of energy on
I'm
this.
gonna,
Less
I
than
think,
$10,000.
guys, I want to kind of, unless there's something really pressing, I want to.
Yes.
Well, I just had a question, I guess, a statement. I mean, I think we're kind of overestimating the cost of counting or doing a survey. We already have survey results. I guess I was wondering, what number is it?
But as Mr. Krieger said, it's somewhat inconclusive because you can't ever get every student to participate in something like that. So
Yeah,
I
I
think
mean,
we
I
got
guess
about a
it's
50%.
We got
got
about a
50%
50%
back.
participation rate. So we can make inferences from what we got back that we thought we knew about how many kids didn't have access, but it was actually a lot more than we thought it was. And if it was a lot more than we thought it was just with 50%
access
of the
at
students.
home, though, so that
Yes.
wouldn't really.
Yes.
I mean, just from my understanding as a student, in the classroom, we don't really have a deficiency in Chromebooks. I mean, I might, just in terms of the classes that I go to, around like half of the students in my class use their own laptops, and I feel like it's not really equity to give everyone the same amount of Chromebooks. That's more of an equality. Equity is trying to raise the students that are at a deficiency to the standards of the other students, and that doesn't necessarily mean giving everyone the exact same thing. It means allocating the right amount of Chromebooks to students that need them. That's not, saying that some kids don't get them, but I think it would be beneficial, since we've had issues with our budget, to more closely look at, can we cut any costs with the Chromebooks? It's just an opinion.
No, and I totally hear what you're saying, that equity is not giving everybody the same thing. But I think we also have to be careful of identifying students as, oh, you're the kid who doesn't have anything, so you get this Chromebook. Do you know what I mean? So then you're calling out students for being the students who can't afford their own laptop. This makes, in the school building, this makes every kid an equal. Everyone has this device to work on. All the teachers know that all the kids are using the same platform. They know how they can work with their classroom full of students. In that way, it makes everyone equal. Now, outside of the classroom, of course, that's much more difficult. You're going to go home and you're going to have access to the internet. You can get on your own laptop. You can do... We can't control for all of those things, but we can try to control the things that we can control, and that's what this is trying to do, without making it a logistical nightmare for the staff of which kid gets one, which kid doesn't. It is much easier for the staff and much less time-consuming to make it an across-the-board initiative in the middle school and the high school.
I mean, we already have a decent number of Chromebooks. If we just order like 400
And again, it's not
more.
just the number of Chromebooks. It is problematic for us to continue to purchase them. Leasing them over time makes much more sense rather than staggering these purchases every year and then breakage. The leasing is how most districts are doing this now. It's kind of become an antiquated thing to purchase Chromebooks every year and then try to replace them.
But if we offer the loans, like if we say like if a student doesn't have access to a laptop at home, we can say like, oh, you can borrow one of the ones that the school has right now that are purchased. Then like I highly doubt that at least and just that would be better than just straight up loaning $950 over 20 years or something like that. But also like taking a survey or getting a survey like right now, Spirit Week, all we have to do is call a 7-minute homeroom, and then the teacher counts up, oh, you need, you're wearing this, you're not wearing that, and then they get it done for the entire student population. If we did something like that with an anonymous survey saying like, or not anonymous, like with the names, but like no one knows, like it's on paper so that no one else is judging you. If you say,
so you,
do
again,
need
we're not going to do a
device?
head-by-head count of who needs one and who doesn't. It's not going to work for the tech department to do that. So we're going to move on from here. Like, I think our tech department, Dr. Nicosia, who's overseeing the program, has kind of thought through all these issues, and to go on a student-by-student basis is not going to work for a program like this. It's simply not going to. So we're going to have to move past that idea.
It is something we thought a lot about, or at least, I personally thought a lot about, and we talked about it, and talked about it, and talked about it.
Yeah.
And
So I hear what you're saying. It's, it's a legitimate point, but.
Sorry. All right.
Okay.
I ran a significantly large high-tech company, software company, with hundreds of people, and I have lots and lots of experience with equipment and networks from early on, the early days of the internet. And I think that I have a reasonable feel for how to do this in the most cost-effective way, which means not hiring people to count things up and not doing surveys and trying to, when you're getting complete results, trying to understand that. And this just seems like a reasonable thing to do. We didn't jump the gun 4 years ago when no one was doing it. We now have the experience of places like Edison and Madison and South Brunswick and seeing what they've done. And I think we can do this really well and help a lot of people. And that's really what we're here for. That's why we volunteer. So, guys, just please go with the program. I think it'll help your fellow students.
No.
And
I'm not convinced yet. So,
Well,
but you guys can work on convincing me.
We're trying.
We don't have to convince you tonight. I mean,
arguments, and I appreciate everything you're doing.
And here's the
because it's
beauty of a
not-
board also, Rob, one person doesn't have to be convinced, right? Like, no one person is the board. So we might not ever convince you, and that's okay. You can ask all the questions you want, but we do have a whole audience here, and I want to move on from this one topic because we still have a whole agenda to get through. So again, if you individually have questions, please forward them all to Dr. Taylor, to Mark, to me, to whoever, and we'll do our best to convince you, but if we can't, we can't, if the rest of the board agrees with it. So if no one else has anything on the computers, we're going to move on.
I'm sorry, just confirming, did you say that we're going to get a presentation on this with details at the next board?
I'll invite Dr. Nicosia to come, likely to the
and I'm sure she's going to really look forward to that.
second May meeting or the first June meeting.
Okay. And I would
Thank
say
you, Scott.
let's all take this energy and advocate for community broadband.
Yeah,
Let's
right.
do it.
That would solve so many problems.
Yes.
And we've tried to think of how to do that in so many different ways. Will Rutgers let us tag on? We just always run into brick walls.
There's a movement, and lots of cities around the country have done it, and it's, a grassroots movement. So take all that energy, Zayu, let's do it. Community broadband.
Council
I'm
meetings?
all for it.
We have a lot of time at night.
Yeah.
But
So I was going to say that we should move on with our agenda and keep public comment where it is, but I think we have a lot of folks here who would like to talk to us, and I don't know that we want to sit here for another hour while we go through our agenda, albeit a short one. So with everyone's permission, I would like to move public comment up to be agenda item number 11.
Second.
Second.
And then we will, all in favor?
Aye.
Is that okay, Linda? We don't have to roll call, right? Okay. So if anyone would like to address the board, now is public comment. You can please come up to the microphone. There should be a sign-in sheet there. Please make sure you put your name and address down on the sheet for the board secretary, but also please state your name and address if you live here in town. If you're a teacher, your name and that you're a teacher. If you're a student, your name and that you're a student.
Okay, my name is Zsuzsanna Havas. I'm the French teacher in the high school. I also live in town. I've lived here for 31 years, worked in the district for 19 years. All three of my children went through the school system. All of them took French. And I'm here to talk about the elimination of French from the high school world language program. We're trying to form global citizens at the high school. We offer a certificate for the global citizenship program. Dozens of flags greet you when you enter the building. We take pride in communicating the respect of all cultures and backgrounds. We put significant effort into making sure that all students are appreciated and their families' origins are celebrated. Yet the decision has been made to eliminate French despite significant student interest. I currently have 82 students, 22 of them in ninth grade beginner class. These are students who did not have French from November of their 7th grade and none in 8th grade. Some of them took another language in 8th grade and still chose to come back to French in the high school. Although foreign language enrollment numbers dropped somewhat with the elimination of mandatory language requirements in the middle school, the French program has been steady with excellent results on the AP exam and in the national French contest. While I welcome the presence of Mandarin, I think it should be in addition to the current program and not in place of it. I also believe that the decision of what languages to offer should be based on student interest after surveying all grades that have a stake in the matter. I wonder if there has been a survey done to poll the high school students, and if not, can one be done? French is the official language in 29 countries, spoken across 5 continents by about 300 million people. It is the second most studied language in the world after English. It's not only the official language, but also one of the working languages of a large number of international organizations, the UN and all of its agencies, like the World Health Organization, UNESCO, also a NATO, International Red Cross, Doctors Without Borders, OECD, European Union, and so on. It serves as lingua franca among numerous Francophone African countries. When we eliminate French, we eliminate studies about Africa. The only context that Africa will be present in curricula is colonization and slavery. We eliminate cultural knowledge about European countries. We eliminate projects and presentations and readings and videos on art history, architecture, painting, sculpture, Paris, Notre Dame, music, history, fashion, family origins, immigration, geography. We eliminate studies on how English came to have about 65% of its vocabulary common with French. We eliminate learning how to understand the so-called SAT words, how to improve knowledge of English morphology and syntax by comparing it with French. We eliminate a learning opportunity. In the absence of French, Spanish classes may increase. This is already happening in the middle school. When a language class increases, proficiency levels go down. For each student, there is less opportunity to speak and be heard by the teacher. For the teacher, more time could be spent on classroom management and less time interacting with students who need to speak individually and need to be heard and corrected. Since I'm not leaving the district, the financial implications of this decision, at least for the time being, seem to be rather limited. We have had 3 languages, Hebrew being the third, and we found a way to finance it. We have the Rutgers French department nearby. Maybe they could serve as a resource since they have graduates that have trouble finding jobs. As the president of the association and several other commenters suggested, we should try to find a way to solve budgetary challenges by spreading out the burden rather than take away content classes and eliminate programs. So I'm asking the board to reconsider its proposed budget so French can stay a part of the world language program. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott, do you want to address any of the concerns about the French program at this?
So I have been meeting with several parents, and I met today with a representative from Rutgers' initiative department, new initiatives department. I'm examining a proposal that they have presented to me, and I will present it to the Finance Committee and discuss the proposal. We're only trying not to grow a budget that we can't even sustain at its current state. So while I'm not going to get into the details about the decision we made 2 years ago, I can assure you that the Finance Committee and I, and the Curriculum Committee, which Michelle McFadden chairs, is going to be looking at this proposal. Ultimately, though, I will have to make a final decision with the input that I receive from the individuals around the table.
Right. And also, I just want to make it clear that anything related to the French program is not a budget cut. This was a decision that was made 2 years ago to start phasing out the French program in response to not a desire of the board to get rid of French, but because we had a resignation of the middle school French teacher and could not find a replacement. We went out, I don't remember how many times. Dr. Taylor went out directly to Rutgers to see if they had any students graduating that would be properly certified. We could not find a properly certified French teacher. So that's where the decision came from, and it came 2 years ago. So now it seems like it's kind of getting lumped into this budget, but it's really not a budget concern other than right now, any of the proposals that are kind of being put on the table to change the decision that was made 2 years ago would actually have the board incurring additional costs to keep now 3 programs, because we had gone down to 2 programs. Hebrew was cut, I think, at least 3 years ago.
4 years.
Was it 4? It was quite some time ago because it was undersubscribed. So we've only had 2 languages in the district for quite some time. So it is very complicated with a lot of different moving parts, and certainly none of those moving parts is, a desire of the board to get rid of French. That was certainly never the impetus for the changes that were put into place, but rather an inability to find a certified French teacher to cover all of the sections that we needed covered.
And didn't we have a situation for almost a year where a substitute was coming in, and it was like an extremely difficult situation for 1 year? We couldn't find anybody, and parents were,
in the middle school.
Was that in middle school?
Right. In the middle school, we talked about adding Mandarin as an option in the middle school. And during those discussions, we talked about the idea, the intent was never to eliminate French, but now students are being told not to sign up for French.
That's not true. That was exactly what was discussed, was that it was going to slowly be phased out.
That's exactly
what was discussed.
There was a possibility through attrition, but...
No.
No, one of our student
No,
reps even was very, I don't know if you recall.
Yeah, Julia Liebel claims.
Yeah,
It was very,
it was
yeah,
just
it was very
really
clearly
on
discussed.
it about not
And we
eliminating
could go
French.
back to videos. I mean, it was.
So we did have a
very clearly laid
groundswell
out.
of concern back when we first introduced this. In fact, I don't know if you recall, but we had members of the community appear at the podium.
Yeah, we certainly had some concern over it, and we have our own concerns over it. But at the time, we weren't finding an option out of it. So
I'm just wondering why then we're eliminating French rather than going back and eliminating Mandarin.
We can't find a French teacher.
We can't find a French teacher for the middle school 2 years ago.
No one can find a French teacher apparently in the whole state.
I had an excellent student teacher in 2017, the whole semester of 2017. He was here. He was perfect. He would have loved to stay in the middle school. He just wasn't considered.
Did he apply to our district?
I should add that when we had to make this unfortunate decision, we said we're going to either be all in, commit to something, or we're going to be half in, half out, which would do the kids no good. We had to commit to something. It was June or July, I think, of 2017. We had spent over $7,000 in our recruiting efforts, months and months and months of trying to find a teacher at that time. At that point, we wanted to make sure we scheduled the students who were waiting for some kind of world language, and we decided on Mandarin based on survey results we received. Albeit, if I had more time, I would have done more surveys. I could have gotten stakeholder groups together like we had done repeatedly when we make these important decisions. We had to go with something. We went with Mandarin because that was the top pick, and now we're committed to it. We have a choice now. We can either rally around the kids who are taking Mandarin. I know we have 51 students at the middle school and at least one section at the high school, so I don't know the exact number total. Or we can say, okay, look, we decided we're going to backpedal on you. Now we're going to have to leave Mandarin and take a couple of steps back again and go, hope when we go back to French, we're going to find somebody. That's why I think we're stuck in this predicament.
I'm talking about the high school. So
yes.
I think it's possible to have, you can carry two languages, Mandarin and Spanish, from the middle school all the way up, and then have French as a third language offered just in the high school if there is no other solution.
But as I mentioned, that at this point, that would, I mean, we're looking at all these different scenarios of if it's conceivable for us to run 3 languages. But again, that would be adding to the budget that we're considering.
I think in light of the fact that I had to reduce teachers at Bartle School, cut a program at the high school, I am just today understanding that I have even more cuts that I have to make, which we just discovered as a result of, not cuts to staff, but cuts somewhere in the budget because I've incurred additional costs that we didn't foresee back at the preliminary budget. I think it would be travesty to the faculty if we now started to stretch our budget surmountably to try to add a third language, as much as we would all love to have 3 world languages in the school district. And I'm right there with you. I think it would just fly in the face of us trying to save jobs.
So next year, is French out at all levels or only 9th grade?
No.
On the table right now is the beginning of the phase out for freshmen so that we would continue to run the program for the sophomores, juniors, and seniors to see them through. So we had told the incoming 9th graders that they can't sign up for French because right now we are on track to phase the program out beginning with the freshmen. Does that answer your question?
It answers my question. I'm disappointed, but it answers my question.
It was the decision the full board made 2 years ago. Just to be clear. I mean, you can say you're disappointed, but you were on the board and when this happened.
I was on the board.
Correct.
And there was no date or timeline set for
No,
when.
it was very clear.
There's a whole phase-out thing that was very complicated for board members to understand, like how, I think we're going to hire a French teacher, like privately, maybe to tutor some people in 8th grade.
I'm talking about the following year when we, last year when we added Mandarin to the high school.
Well, that was
the first step.
That was part of the phase-out, right?
At that time, it was talked about it would phase out naturally, but I don't recall anyone at the table saying that it's going to start in the 2019 or 2020 or.
It was as the kids who had started it in middle school moved up through the system.
French is not tied to, and no program in the high school is tied to what languages you take in middle school.
Okay, so again, now we're in public comment, and now we're sucking up all of public comment with board commentary. So thank you very much. Please know that we're trying to consider every option that's on the table, but this isn't this isn't a budget cut, is what I'm trying to say. We will continue further discussions. Again, Rob, if you have additional questions, you can ask them, but I want to allow people time for public comment.
Denise Mayfire, 314 Wayne Street. I'm appalled by the French department being shut down. I understand it was coming, but nevertheless, one of the most useful things I ever learned in high school as a freshman through a senior was French. I've used it in Turkey. I've used it in India. I've used it in my job to speak to people of African descent. Mandarin is spoken in China. Yeah, okay, fine, it's cool. But French is a global language in that it's spoken many, many places. Why can't we keep freshmen on up? Why can't we keep this as a language? I mean, yeah, we got budget crap going on, which leads me to my next thing. Perhaps we need to consider making our high school combined with another district, because this is not sustainable the way we're doing this. I mean, I'm in favor of this Board of Education. I live here. I choose to live here. And I like our little town, but you know, we're getting slashes here, there. We're losing people. We want to cut out the home economics, which is the last remaining course, and now we're cutting out French. I mean, it's outrageous. One of the most useful things I learned in high school is French. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. I agree, it's frustrating. Is there any additional public comment?
Hi, I'm Julia. I'm a senior, and I have been taking French since 6th grade all the way through 12th, and I'm planning on continuing it in college and hopefully studying abroad in a French-speaking country. And I would just also like to use this opportunity to express my, I guess, as well, my disappointment and my concern for the cutting of the French program. I think probably the most beneficial experience for me through taking French was made obvious when I was studying for tests like the SAT, the PSAT, for classes like AP Literature and AP Lang. There are countless words that I have been able to figure out the definition of based on their French roots or based on a word that I know from French. My vocabulary has been bolstered like tremendously from knowing French, and I'm extremely grateful, and that's just one benefit. Additionally, the grammar in French. I've learned more grammar in French class from Ms. Havis than I have in any of my English classes, and that's because the languages are so similar. It's so similar to English. Actually, I think I was looking it up, and I found that they share about 27% of words are the same throughout the languages. And then this led me to further research, and I was curious. I wanted to find out how long does it typically take someone to become fluent in French, and I found experts agree that it takes about, for languages like French, Spanish, it takes about 600 class hours of learning. And then for context, German takes about 750. And then for languages that are further from English, like Mandarin, Arabic, Chinese, Japanese, and Korean, it takes about 2,200 languages. So for me, that raises the question, is learning a language in high school really helpful if it's spoken everywhere, if you don't know it that well? And I just question the level of fluency that someone can gain in the language of Mandarin as opposed to the fluency that you can gain in French. And that leads me to the point that I am graduating high school with a very high level of fluency, I would say, in French. And this has allowed me to communicate with my friends from countries like Algeria and Canada. This has led me to actually be able to communicate with people when I was able to visit France a few years ago, and to also feel confident that I can sustain myself by myself in a French-speaking country. And just the last thing I would like to share is that someone else mentioned, I think, that French is spoken in 29 countries across 5 continents. And I would say nearly all of those countries we have touched on in my French class in the high school. We've explored culture of countless countries, from Benin to Monaco to Canada to Algeria to all these countries. We've talked about the food, the music, the history, the background, and this is something that I think is entirely unique to the language of French, and I just think it would be a shame to cut this out and to lose this benefit, and I hope that the board keeps this in consideration when all this is said and done. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. I have to say, like I was trying to say before, we've been talking about this for 2+ years. I think the argument that you just made is probably one of the most compelling ones that I've heard. So thank you very much.
Can I
for
just
that.
add something?
Sure, please.
I think, from my understanding of the process of phasing out French, and I definitely heard, a lot of concerns about Mandarin as opposed to French, but it's not about, at least as far as I understand, that one language is better than the other. French definitely has a lot of great aspects to it, and as a person that studies Mandarin, there's also a lot of benefits to Mandarin. I'd also like to add that fluency doesn't always, for Mandarin, it's a lot longer when you count reading ability, as characters you have to study them for a long time. However, speaking is comparatively easier because there's not as much grammar, just as a side note. But yeah, I'd just like to express that French, is a wonderful language, and I'm personally opposed to it being cut, even as a person that studies Mandarin. But it's not about it being a bad language. It's not about it not being important. It's just, I think, a budgetary issue.
We have amazing students. You guys really, seriously, you guys always blow me away. Yes, sir.
I'm taking Spanish throughout middle school and high school, so I haven't taken French. But personally, I do support French over Mandarin, just because of the...
Well, let's not make this a contest.
But only because, the way Mandarin works, it's completely different from English. And, everyone I've spoken Mandarin to is Chinese. I've never used it with any...
Well, apparently you can speak it with the person sitting right to your right.
I've spoken with Avery, but they've explored.
We just blew your theory right out of the waters at you.
No, but I know that they've been to China, they've explored there, and that's cool too. But Julia's also been to France, and she's explored France. She's been able to communicate with people in France. But the thing is that for most of my uses of Chinese, it's been with at least people of Asian descent or Chinese people. But French, I know that the 29 countries, that seems very useful, especially for people who want to study abroad. They'll be able to have a wider choice compared to speaking Chinese. Basically, the only place you can visit is China. But just the way that the two languages are so different, and it's just it's not as useful to have a language that you have minor capability of using compared to one that you can actually understand more, at least in my personal opinion, because the purpose of high school is to prepare students for the real world, for their post-secondary, whatever they choose to do, whether college or go directly into the workforce. And interacting using French seems way more useful than learning Chinese or Mandarin in high school because of the ability that you are able to use it.
Well, the one thing I can assure everyone is that Dr. Taylor is looking at all the proposals that have been put forward, and the Finance Committee tried to look at it tonight, and we completely didn't understand. So Dr. Taylor is going to try to break it down for us so that we can understand it, and we'll report back to everybody for sure.
Yeah, just as a final note, no decisions are really being made tonight exactly, right? So it's not you're going to come to the next session and French is going to be gone. It's very much a longer process, and I look forward to hearing from Dr. Taylor.
It's a very long process.
But again, though, students are being told that there's no 9th grade French.
Because that decision was made 2 years ago. So now we're trying to reconsider if we can reconsider that decision that was made 2 years ago.
Did we
so
vote to
that
eliminate 9th grade French 2 years ago.
I don't remember exactly what the vote was that was taken, but yes, that was the discussion as to how it was going to be phased out. I can go, Rob, I don't have that information at my fingertips, and I know you would like answers right now, but I don't have the answers at my fingertips right now. But that is what was discussed 2 years ago.
We talked about it slowly attritioning out French.
And this is the 2 years.
And we never voted
Rob,
to
okay.
get rid of the class.
Okay. Well, we can look at it more later, but thank you. Hi.
Lynn Fryer, 314 Wayne Street. I took Latin in high school and wasn't wasted, but I didn't get nearly so much as my French-speaking colleagues and wife, etc. And I wish I could be as eloquent and well-spoken as Julia Marx, but alas. I guess I was at the last board meeting and I was at this board meeting, and I just wanted to say that something that Mark Krieger mentioned that kind of struck me, and looking at the whole budget process is Mark kind of saying, but alas, we're bound by that 2% cap that constrains us. And as a taxpayer paying almost $15,000 for my not really impressive house and property, I'm like, I don't feel like I can be squeezed anymore. This model to me is clearly not sustainable, and I don't know finance and I don't know a lot of things, but I don't know how we as a town are going to do this. So when Denise May Fryer mentioned that we should consider merging with other districts, I think that that's something that seriously needs to be explored, and this is my own opinion, and nobody else's. I asked my daughter what she would think about it, and she's like, ooh, bad idea, but I don't know what else can be done, and I don't know. As I said at the last meeting, I don't envy any of you for having to figure this out, but cutting French, cutting home ec, cutting the things that make a difference in so many kids' lives that aren't just, driving English and algebra and kind of the day-to-day drudgery, that's tragic. So, thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, if there isn't any other public comment, then we will move on with the rest of our agenda, and we thank everyone very much for coming out. We do appreciate it. I know sometimes it's difficult, and people who, we typically may agree with on lots of things, may disagree with us on some of the decisions that we have to make. Things like consolidation, things like that take years. It is the only successful ones that I know of in the state tend to be ones where it is K5s, K8s that then merge into a regional district. I don't know in the last several decades of any K-12 districts merging with other K-12 districts. There is a statewide proposal that Senator Sweeney is actively pushing on the state level in terms of consolidation. He's actually looking to go as far as county-wide consolidations. The fascinating thing there is, one thing I think Highland Park really prides itself on is its individuality. And you would lose that tremendously in a county-wide district, or were we to merge with Addison or Metuchen or New Brunswick, or you wouldn't have 9 representatives that represented Highland Park. You might have 1 or 2 representatives that represent Highland Park. You lose a lot in a consolidation. You lose a tremendous amount, which is why typically districts don't end up doing it. And the ones that do, as I said, are those smaller, if 4 K-5s or 4 K-8s all merge into a regional 9-12, then all those districts will merge and become one K-12. But I mean, I could go back and look, but I don't know of any K-12 merging with another K-12 in the last couple of decades. And the process that would take is, and I think even when it happens on a K-5, K-8 going into a 9-12, the cost savings aren't that tremendous. They're just not. It's just expensive to run a school district. And sometimes the larger districts are suffering even worse. The president of the Camden Education Association right now is literally walking from Camden to Trenton, walking to try to bring attention to the situation that his district is in, which is a $27 million budget gap. We're trying to figure out how we're going to fill a $150, I wish, $150,000 gap that just came up. And that district's got to figure out how to solve a $27 million gap. They're closing entire schools. So it may sound like a great idea that getting bigger is the answer, but getting bigger when the entire state is disinvesting in public education just makes the problems bigger. So that would be my argument to you, is that we think our problems are bad here, and they are. I don't want to cut any programs. Any of you who know us knows we did not get on the board to cut staff or programs. That is not what we're here for. But the numbers don't meet. And I pay those taxes too. You know, like, yeah, it's bad. It's really bad. And it's bad on many, many levels. And we're not always going to agree on the solutions, but we're trying to do it in the way that impacts the least kids. And I don't know what else to say. So,
Can I just add that we are focused on priorities? You know, I think that's important to remember, because we are not legislators, we are managers. So we
No, we're not
prioritize. We're not, kind of.
He's
but-
the manager. We're
right,
not the manager.
Right, but I mean,
we're the
as a-
overseers.
As a fiscally responsible body, we are managing the budget. We are not creating, you know, the amount, and so we have to prioritize. So that's just all I wanted to say.
Well, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but what I want to talk about at the next board meeting, and I hope if you can't be here, you'll watch it live or watch it afterwards. I want to present to everyone just what the last 10 years have done to this district, what the last 10 years of disinvestment from the state, the position that has left us in. And I hope it will really reinforce the position that we find ourselves in now, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Okay, so we are going to move on with our agenda items, and thank you all very much for coming out. We do appreciate hearing from you, and we appreciate you coming. Thank you very much. I'll give everybody a minute or so to recess. No worries.
No district in the state can find a teacher. It's just nonsense to say this is doing what you're doing. I'm sorry. Oh, we can get them a certification in the year. I speak French, you know. Yeah. And I learned it in school. And what I was going to say, you should hear this too. I was going to say, understand that I'm very loud. Is I go to France and I speak French to them, and my French is good. They speak English.
Yeah, they do.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Sorry, we're going to wait just a moment because we lost the chair of our curriculum committee. When she comes back, we'll let her give her report. John, maybe you can put on some little hold music or something on the recording for everybody at home.
You want to switch the order? I can do fine. We can wait a moment.
Let's wait. Let's not make poor Linda juggle the agenda any more than we already have. I'm sure she'll be speedy. Actually, Linda, could we do that without you having to juggle anything? Yeah, we can do that without juggling, right? Huh?
It's fine.
Okay, go, Mark. Mark, would you like to discuss the finance and facilities?
Yes, so finance and facilities met this evening at 5:30. We discussed the state of the budget primarily in our meeting. In further review of the preliminary budget, found a large amount of money that wasn't accounted for that we have to find. and we're working diligently with the administration, and I'd say mostly the administration is working diligently with us to find the 150,000. It was 250,000. We think we have it down to 150,000 that we're short. And I'm just going to say, as an opinion, in discussing all of these problems, it is really disgraceful that the state gives us so little back, especially for special education. When I was on the board 30 years ago, we got 80% back of what we spent. That means if you have a good special education program and you support the students, you get a serious amount of money back. People move into your district because your program is good, you got a serious amount of money back. Now we get 20% back, and it's really disgraceful. And that means when people move in during the school year, we have support that we're giving that we haven't budgeted, so it's even worse than it was. The other part is that we are paying the highest rates in the country for our medical insurance with the state education health benefits plan. And it's unsustainable. And that's really what's unsustainable. 1 out of every $6. And I'm, by the way, very much in favor of the best insurance policy money can buy. But that same program that the state provides for the state's own employees costs 2/3 as much as the state education health benefit plan that they provide us. The state health benefit plan, as I said, costs 2/3 as much. It costs the district, costs the provider, the town or the county or the police department 2/3 as much. So it's disgraceful. And that's why it's unsustainable. So I hope Sweeney has talked about changing that and offering us an insurance program that's affordable. And by the way, that's not even inexpensive. The average private employer charges about pays about 1/4 as much. So something is wrong, and the state needs to fix it. We can't fix it. And we all, well, I won't talk about it. It's just terrible. The situation is terrible. We also talked about the French program, what we can do to offer 3 languages. I feel like deja vu. 30 years ago, I was on the board that was offering French, Spanish, and German. And we had 9 students taking German in the whole high school. And we decided we couldn't afford it. We couldn't afford it. So we decided to eliminate German, offer the German students who had taken German up to then, to offer those students tutoring for their German so they could finish their 4 years of German. We still had people coming to board meetings, and I say correctly, but we couldn't afford it, saying to us, why can't you continue German? It's the major language in Europe, and all of the scientific texts are done in there. And I would say, as a French speaker, I lived in Europe, I lived in Geneva, I learned French fluently. I took French in school, and then I really got to learn to speak French when I lived in Geneva. I'm very sad if we'll have to, and I think given the finances and the lack of ability to find French teachers in the middle and long term, I think it's going to be very difficult for us to keep. I'm very, very sad that we'd have to do something like that. But I think we have no choices. Okay, so.
No good choices.
Okay, so the committee, the Finance and Facilities list here. So we have the usual bill lists. Item number 2, the travel and related expense reimbursements is number 3. Number 4 on our agenda is contractors for professional services. In this case, is Barbara Wyszynski to proctoring a variety of exams in the month of May. Item 5 is a student going to an out-of-district placement at the New View Academy in Piscataway, New Jersey for $50,688 annually, prorated, starting April 9th. Item 6 is a one-to-one aid for a student attending the Matheny School in Peapack, New Jersey, effective January 30th costing $17,100 a year. Item 7 are 2 students with bedside instruction. Item 8 is I'd say a happy item, accepting the award of $2,000 from the Lexus Eco Challenge to be used by Mei Ping's class to purchase science lab equipment. As is number 9, the resolution to accept Highland Park Education Foundation grants in the high school for the project titled Make Princeton Glow for $650, and in the high school technology and education iPads valued at $3,740. Item 10 is the approval of a submission of a safety grant to NJSIG for the amount of $4,924.23 to augment the cost of upgrading security systems at various locations around the district. Item 11, items 11 and 12 are both pass-throughs, meaning we approve them, but these 2 schools get the money from the state. So it's the Children's House Montessori School and the Rinas Beas Yaakov School. Both of them look like security equipment. Item 13 is a resolution to participate in coordinated transportation with the Educational Services Commission. 14 is the same with the Hunterdon County Educational Services Commission. 15 is Somerset. 16 is Franklin. 17 is Bridgewater Raritan Board of Education participation in coordinated transportation. And 18 is the same with the Piscataway Township Board of Education.
All set?
Yep.
Okay. Excuse me. Mr. Krieger, there was a note on the report that I'd like you to review and just mention about
Oh, yes, indeed.
pipe installation.
Yep, I have it here. I have to go through my notes. Thank you, Linda. Is this the pipe insulation?
Yeah.
So we spend so much time on the budget that we didn't get much chance to discuss this. So we've gathered 3 quotes for replacing pipe insulation at the middle school to prevent mold growth due to sweating pipes. They're above ceiling in 5 classrooms. The work is going to be done over the spring break before we turn on the air conditioning, and we have to have the contract approved retroactively on April 29th. We have 3 quotes, and we are going to approve the quote from Pipe Design LLC for $8,648.61.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, for reminding me.
Okay. Anyone have any question on any of the finance items for Mark?
Just a clarification.
I'm sorry, is that you?
I'm
Can
so
you
sorry.
just give me a heads up, okay? First, like, we kind of let board members go and then, okay? Thanks.
Just a quick question about the sweaty pipes in the middle school. Oh, I'm sorry. Monique, do you want to?
I'm sorry.
I should take the same advice I you.
Okay.
Sweaty pipes, middle school, mold. This comes up frequently. Are these pipes that have not previously been repaired? Yeah.
Linda.
So they were insulated, I would say 4 years ago, but the job was not done very well.
Oh, no.
And the problem is that they didn't go deep enough. And so the condensation seeped through to what was insulated and has, damaged that insulation. So they need to go further in to be able to contain it and contain it better.
So we think these guys know what they're doing?
These are, yes, we're much more confident in the quality of work that will be performed than of the outfit that did it last time.
Awesome. Thanks, Linda. Thank you, Mark.
Sorry, just a question on one of the good items, the technology and education iPads. How does that work? Is that going to be for just to have in the building, or
I don't
do you know?
I don't know. I don't know how those are being
Is this
allocated.
The grant from the Ed Foundation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I was just curious.
Who's on the Ed Foundation? That's Rob.
Rob.
Well, how it's being allocated?
Yeah.
The the teacher, the grantee, had applied for those. So that's how it's allocated through the teacher. But I don't recall specifically what this program is. So, Scott, do you remember?
I don't, but I can get back to you. Linda's actually pulling the application.
Not the application, but I have the email about it, which will give a little bit more. So this is Ms. Alexandropoulos, who is an ESL teacher or ELL teacher. This is 8 iPads-related equipment. It doesn't really give any description on the purpose, but I know that she runs an ELL class, and I have a feeling it's probably to aid them in translations and things like that.
The teacher who applied for the grant is actually right there.
Yes, Scott, do you want to have, yes, Scott. Nobody's going to be able to hear her.
No, I'm sorry. Well, do you mind if she comes up to the podium?
Not at all.
Do you mind coming up to the... Oh, it's not public comment, though?
That's funny. She's in order for the public.
Yeah, okay.
Cyber world to hear her.
Yeah.
This is Hannah Pollock, by the way. Hi,
I'm
special
Hannah.
education teachers.
So basically, we get an email about the grant, and we apply for it. It could be a collaborative grant. It could be an individual grant. If it's a grant over $1,500, I believe, don't 100% quote me on that, but it would be a collaborative grant. Otherwise, it's an individual grant, and you just kind of write what you're using the money for. You put kind of a budgetary thing together, and you hear back. So pretty
Right.
basic.
So the grant also, so it is made, the application is made to the Ed Foundation, but before it gets to the Ed Foundation, the principal and the superintendent also review the grants applications, and then...
Yeah, I was just asking, not about the process, I was just curious to know
Exactly
about
how
the
it's
program.
going.
That's
Tell you what.
What
they're being used for.
Yeah. So the meeting of the foundation is tomorrow night, actually. I'm not going to be attending. Anybody who wants to attend should attend. Might be able to find out specifically that one. But in the meantime, between now and our next meeting, we certainly can come up with the answer.
Okay, great, thanks. I just want to point out one more thing, because this kind of goes along with my theme of late of the state's disinvestment in public education. We approve these expenses every once in a while of what, as Mark correctly called, a pass-through of money that goes from the state to us, to private schools for security, typically for security and for nursing.
Right.
Just at the beginning of this year, actually, the legislature passed and the governor signed a bill that doubles that funding for private schools. So it's an additional $11.3 million on top of the 11.3. If they're doubling it, I'm assuming there was already 11.3 allocated. Every $11.3 million that the state spends somewhere is that much less that they have to spend somewhere else. So if the state just doubled the amount of money that's going out to private schools, that's that much less money that is available to flow into public schools. So this is all of these little bits and pieces where the state decides to take money, and instead of giving it to the kids who are in the public schools, give it to the kids somewhere else, in the charter schools or in the private schools or that's all this disinvestment.
Right. So I was even going to make that point.
And the idea of us, I'm sorry,
Go
the
ahead.
idea of us being the pass-through is that we're somehow supposed to be the stewards of those monies, like that we're overseeing that somehow. But our staff doesn't have time to oversee how much just flowed through us, $13,000.
Right, it's
What
flowing-
staff member are
flowing
we
through.
supposed to have go follow up to see how that money got spent?
Right.
That's money that is flowing through us from the state to a private school to be used, I don't know. I mean, we're just taking it at its face value so that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I don't actually even have a problem with the money being used through the state for something like this, for security at a school, as much as I have that we are so limited in the money that they actually pass back to us for all of our programming.
Well,
I mean,
but I'm trying to make the point that this is why.
Well,
That
it's not-
the
it's
state
not
doesn't have enough
completely why.
money to fund the schools that they're responsible for. The state's not responsible for the private schools. A private school is a private responsibility. That's not where the money should be going. The money should be going into the public system, which is what the state is actually responsible for. The state is responsible for running a system of public schools, not a system of private schools.
Yeah, but in their budget, they choose what their priorities are.
Well,
they
and we're
choose that their
feeling
priority
the brunt of those priorities.
Is to fund that and not this.
Right. Well, and we're feeling the brunt of that. So I just like pointing that out wherever
Not to
it
mention
rears its ugly head.
Not to mention the $4 or $5 million that have gone to charter schools from our district in the last 10 years.
Yup. Just like to point it out.
Yeah, but
I mean, I
we
don't
don't-
like to point it out. I just feel like I feel the need to point it out.
I mean, we don't make real estate developers profit though, so.
Well, there you go. So, does anybody, I'm sorry, is that you? You had a question you wanted to ask?
Oh
Mr.
yeah.
Krieger?
So one of my friends mentioned one of the problems that he encountered. So since this is finance and facilities, right? The security cameras are broken, at least for the ones that are pointed at the bike racks. And so his tires were slashed, and he went in and he wasn't able to find out who did it because the security camera is not
At the high school?
Yeah, at the high school. And then he says that it's the same thing happened with the other tires are slashed too. So it's just the security issue. I was wondering if it could be fixed.
Yeah. Use your mic.
I'll follow up with you. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Zaid. All right, so Michelle, we're going to bounce back to you for curriculum.
Sounds good. Okay, so we have very short curriculum and instruction section. There's 4 items. So number 1 is the report. I'll run through that quickly in a minute. Number 2 is the resolution to approve field trip requests. And you notice on there's a couple of those music trips, which we were talking about in our committee. And though they look very expensive, a lot of that cost is paid by the students who are attending. And there's a lot of educational value to attending these, as far as we could tell on our committee. I don't know how much is required, but if a student is in need, they can get assistance with that portion. They also do a lot of fundraising. So I just wanted to point those things out. Number 3 is the resolution to approve the HIB incident report for February 2019. And there was only 1 incident there, letter A. Number 4 is a resolution to approve the memorandum of agreement for the high school scholars program. And this is a program in which high school students will have the opportunity to earn college credit through Middlesex County College that is taught by the Highland Park faculty. So let me just explain that, and then we'll go back to the committee report. So the memorandum, of agreement, I cannot say that word, is just for the course, where is this listed here?
Pre-calculus.
It's one of our high school math courses.
Pre-calculus. I was trying to find the exact name of it. But so this is a course that students would be able to take in Highland Park with a Highland Park faculty member. The faculty member would be trained and given, I guess, certification. Is that the word? Certification through Middlesex County College. And it could be 10 or more students in this program. The cost is minimal. I don't know if this number is correct. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it says the participant fee is $200 for the course. But the price is actually going to be $125
Correct.
as of fall 2019. So they would be earning 4 credits. Is that
Correct.
right? 4 credits, and the price is $125. And again, that's just for the 1 course, pre-calculus. So it's not
We're going to pilot this and see if it is something we want to expand on.
right. And then so subsequently, we'll find out what those other courses could be in the future, but we haven't really discussed that as of right now. The committee met on April 8th, and I believe all of us were there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. So we got an update from the supervisor for the humanities, Rebecca Fittipaldi, and she gave us a pretty lengthy presentation on the state of the curriculum. And so I don't know if I want to go into detail with all of this because she did give us quite a few details.
Can you just send it around to everybody? to
Yeah, I can
review?
absolutely do that.
Give us
yeah.
like some highlights?
I mean, right now I can just give you a quick summary and say that a lot of work is being done on the ELA programs in the high school and also across curriculum from Bartle to the middle school. So there's a lot of work trying to get Bartle and the middle school to be a cohesive curriculum and to work together to produce that in the faculty. So she's overseeing that at this time. So part of that ELA work that we were talking about that would go through 9th to 12th grade is concentrating on overlapping skills so that if you use vocabulary for different skills in your classroom in Bartle, that should carry you through to the middle school as well as the high school so that you're always referencing the same things, and each classroom, each teacher would be, I guess, not having to be redundant in that way that sometimes we talked about in the former math curriculum, where you're redoing the same skills in the beginning of the year and finally learning something a little bit new towards the end of the year. That was remediated in the math curriculum. Now we're looking at the same thing in the language arts. Also, what else did we talk about? So we did a review of the Therapeutic support program, and we all heard that from Ms. Boudin tonight. We also talked about the LGBTQ anti-bias action plan, which is an ongoing program to make sure that throughout the years 2018 to 2020, we have a solid, cohesive plan on how to engage the entire student body and the faculty on the concept of anti-LGBTQ bias, so that we're all on the same page. It's not complete at this point, but the plan is as follows. So there's a review happening, a review of the gender identity support plan throughout all the schools, and the principals are involved in that. The Dean of Restorative Practices is responsible for community building and making sure that the LGBTQ community is involved in all aspects of the restorative practices, and that concept also, not just that students that are advocating for themselves continue to advocate for themselves, but that is part of the restorative practices as a whole. Also, there is an event called Grade 8 Against Hate, which occurred on March 1st, and that was run by the grades 8 and 9 guidance counselor, Ms. Middleton. Grades 6 through 8 health curricula is being reviewed for inclusion of gender identity and sexual orientation, and this review and possibly update is going to be modeled on the Gender Spectrum curriculum, which is a program that covers grades 2 through 5. So Dr. Taylor is working on that, and that should launch in September. Also, there is going to be a saga group in the middle school. So that is super good news. And
What is that new acronym? It's not straight.
No, it used to be the Straight and Gay Alliance,
right? But it's not that anymore.
No,
It's the same acronym, but different.
Sexuality and Gender Alliance.
Aha! I knew it was different.
Yeah. The point of this is to make sure that the support that's given through the saga group at the high school is preemptively, there for the middle schoolers. It seems like there is quite a gap in that department, so I think that everyone is in agreement that that's a really good idea, and that's actually been started, as far as I know, as of the beginning of April. So students that I personally know are, excited about it. I feel like that's the general consensus. Also, we're going to have the middle school principal responsible for putting together an LGBTQ support parent advisory committee. what's really necessary is for us to pay some attention to students that would consider themselves non-binary. So we have, some awareness of what transgender, the word means, the concept, but it seems like there's still some confusion. And so with parents of non-conforming students, gender non-conforming students, will surely be a part of that parent advisory committee to make sure that those students are getting their needs met and that other students are aware that those students exist and aware of what those students' needs are as well. And lastly, this September, the superintendent, the supervisor of humanities, and the middle and high school principals will be potentially piloting a new curriculum, the Garden State Equality LGBTQ inclusive curriculum. And if we were to do this and everything goes as planned, we would be the first school in New Jersey to pilot the program. So that's all very, oh, I think I missed something here. So sorry. One more good thing. Becoming an Ally is a program that is a middle school and high school principal task. So Becoming an Ally is a program that's going to be responding to name calling and bullying. And I'm not so sure exactly how this ties into in-school suspension. Maybe you could fill us in on that, but that's what's written here. In-school suspension, how is that?
The overhaul?
The ADL. The ADL program? Sorry, the ADL program?
So when we had an incident last year, I worked with the Anti-Defamation League, and they proposed that we incorporate into our overhaul the in-school suspension program that I hope is going to culminate in 2020. A component, this is a package program that the ADL actually offers to help students understand the harm that they're doing to other kids when they're using words, some of which we've discussed in our meetings about the discipline report that are derogatory, without some of our students even realizing that they're derogatory. This, Michelle, is part of our larger plan to provide to build what I'm building for the discipline study group as a whole student support in-school suspension program.
Okay. So then in-school suspension would be in this...
It would be like an hour part of that whole day.
Okay, so it would be like a therapeutic
Correct,
suspension.
absolutely.
Right, okay. All right, that concludes my report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions for Michelle?
Not for Michelle, but a quick one for Scott. Going back to the MOA with Middlesex County College, I know it's with Chris for pre-calc. Do you know if it would be also offered for the students in honors pre-calc? It seems like it would make sense, but then that would double the pool of students, because I think he's got like 54 students in pre-calc this year. He probably will have like the same in pre-calc and honors pre-calc.
Let me find out from Mr. Lassiter what he was envisioning to be the scope, and I'll get back to you on that.
And I know it's not in the course guide, like with an asterisk or anything, but whether we can reach out to the students that are enrolled in the course for next year, right, and tell them now that this is there, so that way they know. It's like, oh, if I put aside $125, it might earn me some college credit, and then that way they're not sprung with it the first day of class going, hey, if you want to sign up for this.
Okay, cool. I'm going to put that on Mr. Lassiter's radar and then get back to you about that.
I think that'd be great, because I've always been interested in this program, and I'm glad to see that we're like every time I've called Middlesex County College about it, they were like, oh yeah, Highland Park participates.
Yeah, that came up in our meeting. I did it.
Yeah, but it's like exactly how and when.
Well, now it's actually going to happen for real.
Right.
All right.
It strikes me as an odd choice to offer a course that we already, it's a duplicate of our pre-calculus course. We already offer pre-calculus, right? Why did we decide to do a college course that's pre-calculus rather than something we don't already offer? Is it a different kind of pre-calculus, or?
No, I think it's more so about finding a teacher that has the qualifications and where our course lines up with their course. So we're actually like almost following their lesson plan and their course plan.
Right.
So we're hitting all those components, and pre-calculus isn't necessarily something that's required for as a graduation requirement here.
Right, right.
So
But why not offer a course that's not already, I mean,
But why not, by the same argument, why not get college credit for a class you're already taking?
I guess so. Why don't we, could we like,
oh, so like
do we need to continue the other pre-calculus course? I mean, it's, right, if everybody's taking pre-calculus, can they all get college credit for it? Or is it just a couple kids? I mean, it just.
I do think Michelle's point is a good one. If this expands, perhaps we should have the curriculum committee review the options at the same time that the administration is thinking about moving forward. So we can work together to make a choice before we come to you and say, this will be the course we're going to offer.
I think what the decision was made, as far as I can understand, the decision was made because of credentials in the faculty, willingness in the faculty, because they're going to have to do a little bit more paperwork, I would assume, to get certified or registered, or however you want to say, with the county college. And also, we have this as a pilot. So this is just a small sample of students that we can pilot the program.
Try it out.
Yeah, and then we can expand it later, hopefully, and have more decision-making capabilities about the courses. But I think that the personnel issue was a big one, trying to find someone who was willing. Yeah.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So if we're expanding this program, the Middlesex Scholars Program, to pre-calc, is it an option to expand it to include French? I know Middlesex offers French, I think.
Hopefully. I mean, who knows in the future, but right now it's just a pilot program.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's not a bad idea.
It's not a bad idea.
Just in addition to the Middlesex Scholars Program, most colleges do placement testing for math. So if a student wants to do that instead of getting this and spending $125 on this, I feel like it should be an option that they're told about before they sign up for the program, and to make sure that they understand that there is placement testing for college.
I think that, from what I understand anyway, you're given the placement test after you've already registered, like you've chosen your college, and then you take the placement test for their math program, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that would discourage anyone from not getting college credit beforehand. Do you know what I mean? Like it's going to cost you a little bit of money, but it won't cost you any money to take that math placement course because you've already registered and promised yourself to that college.
Okay. If nobody has anything else for Michelle, let's move on to personnel with Ann.
Okay. Most of the items on here are self-explanatory. I'll get back to the committee report in a moment. We have our usual source for teachers substitute list, which we approve, legal settlement, a termination, a family leave of absence. Just moving quickly down these, a medical leave of absence, another medical leave, 2 other medical leaves of absence, maternity and child care leave of absence. We have a resignation. Is it Opiela? Ms. Opiela is resigning, and Ms. Martinetti is resigning at Bartle, so we're sorry to see our teachers go. Oh, and Mrs. Schmoen is resigning. We're also sorry to see Ms. Schmoen go.
Should that be put as a retirement?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, it's a retirement.
For reason of retirement, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, resign.
Oh, it does have the reason for retirement.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
it says resign, but then, yes, it doesn't.
Yeah.
For her, it says specifically retirement.
Yeah. So 3 retirements.
3 retirements. Or 1.
Retirements, right?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Even more. Nurse Toy at Bartle is also retiring, resigning for reasons of retirement. Mr. Gunn, Mr. Gunn is leaving us. I think that was new since our meeting, perhaps. And this is exciting. A part-time adaptive physical education teacher who'll be working 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. And as I understand things, Mr. McGlynn will be providing the adaptive physical education for a student or students who have special needs in that regard. And Mr. Richards will be replacing Mr. McGlynn, teaching the general ed and inclusion population. Okay, we have some after-school high school assistants, including the Mayfire child, the Mayfire young man. Some Schedule B appointments. Mr. Mladnick has stepped up to coach middle school baseball. Thank you very much. Ms. Gerlach, might be pronouncing that wrong. Bartle School Run for Fun. Thanks, guys. Ed Camp hours. Ed Camp, I understand, was 2 weekends ago, I think, Scott? Ed Camp. this is for the ed camp dealing with social emotional learning?
Correct.
That the district ran 2 weekends ago? Okay. Let's see, professional transfer, extension of hours for an current intern at the teen center, doctoral level students, let's see, practicum students at the teen center who I assume will be providing counseling there, a social work intern at the teen center, and the organizational chart. Scott, is there anything you wanted to point out in particular about the organizational chart that we're looking at? Or is that, you know
That's
what?
under policy? Sure.
I apologize. When I converted this document, it moved up to personnel. That's a policy issue. Yeah.
No problem.
My apologies. Conversion does not always work successfully. In terms of our meeting, we met last week, and I sent around, or I shared with everybody, notes from that meeting. It included a list of job postings for the district that are going out or have already gone out. We also discussed the anti-LGBT bias plan and talked a little bit about the ed camp. We talked about the proposed elimination of home ec. As I understand things, the budget has become even more dire since our meeting. So concerns expressed about the home ec program are perhaps even going to be more difficult to address in light of the new situation. But members of the 4 separate committees will be meeting on Wednesday to discuss what's going on with home ec and just to hear more about how Scott and the Finance Committee decided on that recommendation. Unfortunately, it does seem like that meeting will mostly be to give committee members the bad news about recent new budget problems. But I appreciate Mark and Scott and everybody else being willing to get together and talk about that. Getting rid of that program is not something that anybody wants to do. So, we're trying everything, but I'm not too optimistic. And we also had a presentation from Ms. Budine about the Therapeutic program being proposed for Bartle. I wrote out a long thing in the Personnel Committee notes. I think everybody in our committee still has some questions about how that program will look, how successful it will be to have 8 students potentially with significant behavioral challenges in the same classroom. And I think Susie and Scott will answer some of those questions as time marches on and we talk more about the program and decide whether to put it in. We did talk, I think Ruth pointed out, and Ms. Budine addressed it, the alternative to UBHC, which is, or one alternative to UBHC, which is Effective School Solutions. That's a program that tends to, as I understand it, it's focused more around inclusion, where students with the behavioral or therapeutic or emotional challenges are largely placed in general ed classrooms with significant push-in support. So there was a discussion at our meeting about, whether that would work, why the UBHC program is being recommended. So this is just all something for board members to think about as we move along with the budget. I believe that exhausts my report. Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Ann on any of the personnel items? Nope. All right, so we'll move on to Mr. Krieger with our sole policy.
Right, we're meeting this week. Policy is meeting this week. We've had to put it off because of some conflicts. We're going to meet this week. We have a list of about 10 policies, most of which are updates from state regulations and law and so on that we have to review. We'll be going over those. The one new policy update was the organizational chart, which we did review, and it I think effectively shows the organization of the school district, people-wise.
Looks good to me. Any questions for Mark?
Quick question, it's bridging a few things, but in terms of policy, have you looked at whether or not we have to review any policies this summer based on a one-to-one program?
No, we have not. We have not specifically.
Specific.
Yeah. That's a very good idea, though.
Yeah, good point.
And I appreciate it. I will we'll discuss that, and maybe I'll take that on to go over the list, or Scott, perhaps.
Terrific. Our meeting's tomorrow, so.
Okay, well, we will do that, and thank you.
Yeah.
Guys, have a good night. Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
Okay, if there's nothing else for Mark, Monique, you have anything for us from Equity and Excellence?
Right, we haven't met since the last meeting. We're meeting May 2nd.
Okay. We moved the public comment up, so I'm just going to go up to, skip down to my president's report. I just wanted to let everybody know that a week ago today, Dr. Taylor and myself and Ochechi, who's the president of the senior, or the high school student council, correct? Is that her?
Ochechi is our, of course, senior.
Wait, she's not still here. Why are you pointing over there?
Student Congress President.
Student Congress President. Okay, I don't want to give her title incorrectly. And we went and met with Senator Deignan and presented him with some of the information that I want to present to the community next week. And I'll put together a presentation and try to flesh that out for everyone to make the case for him, because there's a lot of talk at the state level right now, as I mentioned earlier. The president of the Camden Education Association marching to Trenton. There are folks from all of the larger urban districts walking from their districts to Trenton to then have a meeting on the 17th to make their case about what their budget woes are. There's another whole separate group of districts that are kind of being called S2 districts that are impacted by a bill that was passed, I think, late last year that kind of rearranged funding for some districts. So there are multiple districts across the state that are going through even worse cuts than we are going through. Old Bridge is talking about closing a building, right? So, I mean, there are massive budget problems going on across the state. So those S2 districts have been going to the state and they've been petitioning their case. And district like ours, we're in the getting more money pile, but it's not enough money to sustain our budget. So I just wanted him to know that, no, we're not in that clump of urban districts that are closing multiple buildings and have multi-million-dollar deficits. We're not in that clump of S2 districts that are losing large chunks of funding and are having to lay off massive numbers of staff members and close buildings. But we are in a lump of districts that, while you may put us in the column of we're getting more money from the state, we're still hurting. We're still to the point where we can't raise our taxes anymore, nor do we want to, nor should we have to. But the state is not making up that difference. So we're also at the point where there's nowhere else to cut. There's nowhere else to go for additional revenue. And the only place that we can go as healthcare costs increase, as special ed costs increase, as charter school costs increase, as we're met with all of these additional burdens, the only place to go is to start to reduce programs and staff. There's just nowhere else to go. One suggestion that I made to him that I will follow up on, and I've already started talking with other people that I know who run other organizations in the state. And actually, Ruth, I want to talk to you about this so you can reach out to some of your contacts, because you have more contacts than I do in the special ed world. One of the recommendations that he actually really liked and he thought he could possibly move forward into a legislative process is, one of the things that's really impacted us in the last 2 or 3 years are these unilateral placements that we get, where we've set our budget, we've gone, okay, here's what we can do for next year, and then summer comes and September comes, and we have 2 or 3 families that make a decision to unilaterally place their student in a private school, hire an attorney, sue us, and then we've got to figure that out. We've got to figure out our own legal fees, we've got to figure out how to settle with those folks. And those settlements can cost us $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. You get 2 or 3 of those on top of each other with the legal fees, and we're in a few $100,000s that we didn't budget for. So Senator Deignan liked the suggestion that in instances like that, when students are going right out of a private school into another private school, only enrolling with a public school for a short period of time, only to disenroll and then go back out to another private school, that the state should actually be responsible for that the district shouldn't be responsible for that. Right. So if I can kind of help him put together language around that, it seems like it might be something that he's willing to put forward. That's wonderful. If we had that $300,000 a year, we wouldn't be sitting here fighting about French or home ec or whatever else. But it's those kinds of costs that are pushing us to the point where these are the only recourses that we have, because these other obligations are obligations that we have to meet. So I'll try to put that together more concisely for our next meeting in a presentation. I shared some of it with Anne so that the committee chairs can talk about that in the meeting. I'm sorry, you said tomorrow, right? Wednesday, sometime this week.
Sometime.
Because I think the other thing that's not clear all the time, even to board members necessarily, when the Finance Committee and Dr. Taylor come out with our proposed budget, that is just a proposal, right? That's our first, okay, we've all put our heads together in a room and we're doing the best we can to kind of piece these pieces together. Here's what we think, everybody, and here's what we think everybody board, here's what we think everybody staff, here's what we think everybody community, and then we get this input. So, where we really do appreciate folks coming to us and telling us what your priorities are, and to see if we can reconfigure and juggle the budget to meet those priorities. But again, the problem is we have competing, pressures on the budget that we absolutely have to meet. So we will juggle as best we can and try to make all those numbers add up at the end of the day, while still continuing to go to the state and letting them know that we need them to do more for us, which is very difficult. So that's my little spiel, and you'll hear more from me on all of that not next week, 2 weeks from now, including pretty pictures. Because I know I learn better if I have a graph or a table or something I can actually look at. But some of the information I asked Linda to put together for us for that meeting with Senator Deignan was just to go back over the last 5 years and look at the increases in some of our costs and the comparing decreases in some of the money that we're getting back from the state. And it really does paint the picture, along with some data from the Education Law Center, who I'm grateful for on a daily basis for the data collection that they do, that really paints a very clear picture of how much our district has lost over the last 10 years from the state. We're actually functioning now with less state funding than we did 10 years ago, which is startling. And when you look at that, and we'll look at that at the next meeting, contrasted with the changes in our population, including more students, changing demographics, you really start to see where the squeeze happens. So I hope to make that case to everyone next week. Not that that means, again, that we're going to agree on where the cuts are, but hopefully it'll let you know that how up against the wall our backs actually are. So with that, does anybody have any questions for me on my soliloquy? No?
Well, I just say thank you for going to see the senator, and he certainly has always had open interest and ears and view towards helping the schools.
Yeah.
He just has to deal with the Senate, and that's a bigger problem. But no, it's really good that you have that connection and you can go and talk to him and he listens.
Yeah, no, he really does. I will give him that. His ears were open, and as soon as he heard that suggestion, he kind of perked up.
Yep.
And he was like, that's something concrete I could work with. He's like,
man.
he really wants people to come to him with, give me some concrete suggestions. Don't just come to me and bellyache. So I try to present him with, well, here's something you could try. And, this is what the state does with charter schools. When we get students who are in a private school and they come and they enroll and then they disenroll and they go to a charter school, the state picks up that spending. So this suggestion isn't out of nowhere. This is how the state handles charter school enrollment. So it stands to reason that it should and could potentially work the same way for these kinds of circumstances. And again, this, in the last 2 or 3 years, this would have helped our budget tremendously if we had that few $100,000 that we didn't lose mid-year unexpectedly.
That's a fantastic idea. I wonder if the senator or any other legislators would like some comparative analysis, because I feel like there's things that we do to our public education system that we would never dream of doing to our police departments or our water systems or our, any other public entity. I feel like it's unthinkable that you would hire a private police officer. They've
done it in Camden. They do, and they will do it.
No, I totally get it. I mean, everything is being privatized because that's how people make money. Like I said before, we don't provide a money-making source. We don't open up a market at the public schools. I think we start to forget that there are certain things that are sacrosanct, and then there are other things in our society that are, we just pick them apart. And, survival of the fittest is the rule. And it's disgusting to see that this is what we do with schooling K through 12.
I think the really unfortunate part is what it ends up doing is, like I said, there's, the urban districts that are going and making their cases, or the S2 districts that are going and making their cases. It pits people against people, which is what's really unfortunate. Like what all districts should be doing is working together to go to those who are making the decisions up here to say, hey, we're all suffering down here. We shouldn't all be competing for resources, but that's the position that we end up being put in, is that, us little people down here on the ground start fighting each other for the little scraps that are coming down from above. And it is at this point scraps. I mean, that is really what's being sent to public schools from the state at this point. Even with the governor who promised additional funding, and it is putting in additional funding, it's still not enough, and that was the case that I was trying to make.
I just feel like as a demonstrative tool.
Yeah. It's very hard for them. It's very hard for a lot of legislators, I think, to see the big picture like that, which is why I work for an organization that tries to paint that big picture. So.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Actually, often it's like beating my head against a wall, but my pleasure.
Well, we appreciate you beating your head against the wall.
Thank you. Anybody have anything for old business?
I do have one item. I'm sorry I didn't share
Don't
with
be
the board
sorry.
previously, but I got a question my way regarding the math redesign plans we have. It's been a while since we've talked about what we're projecting to do with middle school math, so I thought I would just circle back to it very quickly because I know it's late. We have pushed back by 1 year our timetable to redesign our middle school math program so that we reduce, not eliminate, but reduce the number of levels that we are offering to our students. So right now we're not looking for an implementation until 2020, 2021. Reason for that is because we did convene an advisory group made up of teachers, parents, board members, administrators, and a specialist in this area from Rutgers University, Dr. Dan Batty, who really pointed out how carefully a district must go down this road if it's going to go down this road. He pointed to a couple of school districts in the area who will not be named that didn't necessarily succeed by consolidating some of its tracks because it didn't do that prep work ahead. So we have a really, really comprehensive plan in place, but it's going to take us an extra year to get there. I need to, we've been doing this ad nauseum because we've been talking as a board about redesigning the middle school math program for at least a year. But I need to reiterate something that we've said time and time again. We are not completely reducing and eliminating all the tracks at the middle school for math. What we're talking about doing is leveling the playing field to a greater extent for all of our kids. We still will have a opportunity for kids who are real high flyers in mathematics to take the high flyer classes. What we're talking about doing, again, is taking the on-level and the below-level classes, consolidating them successfully. So I just want to put that out there again. I got the question, came my way, but I thought it deserved at least a little attention again.
And we have another meeting on that on Wednesday, I
We
believe,
do,
right?
we do.
We have a math
We've been
redesign
meeting
committee
quite a
meeting
bit.
on Wednesday.
Yeah, there's actually not only there's this committee that Darcy's on meeting almost monthly, if not every other month, but we have subcommittees that are meeting to look at scheduling, look at curriculum development, look at professional development. So we're doing this very carefully.
Yep.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you very much. Anybody have anything else for old business? No? And I'll just put this out there based on what Dr. Taylor said, because I think all of us as board members sometimes get frustrated by pace of change issues, myself included. We're like, no, this is about kids and this is about... But it was very helpful to have Dan Batty in that room to say, no, you do have to do this carefully. You do have to plan this very well. You do have to have these additional supports in place. And fast is not always necessarily better, which is hard for me to hear sometimes.
Good.
You hear the way I talk, so you can imagine I want everything.
But it's not about speed, it's about prioritizing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So as much as I don't like hearing that sometimes, I do have to slow my own self down and
But the
say,
goal is still
yes,
the
it is
goal.
better to get there a year later than it is to get there a year earlier and do it wrong and have it all blow up. So, all right. So if no one else has anything for old business, anybody have anything for new business? No. And that would bring us to our last public comment session for the evening. If anyone has public comment, you're welcome to go back up to the podium, sign in. I will just ask Denise, though, if there's anybody who hasn't made public comment before that wants to make public comment before our friend Miss Mayfryer does? No? All right, it's all yours.
It'll be brief. Please tell me the name of the high school vice principal.
High school freshman, what?
High school vice principal.
What's her name, please?
Miss Keisha Golden Cooper?
Miss Keisha Golden Cooper needs to be highly commended for instituting all kinds of stuff and lighting a fire beneath the guidance department and having these fairs and having some, I guess, there was a fair for jobs, and then there was a couple other things for the sophomores and the freshmen. Cool. And this stuff was unheard of before. And you know, I have a high-flying kid, and we're spending a lot of money to try to help her get into college, and I have a middling in terms of his performance kid, and there isn't a lot
You're
for the
awesome,
kids
Luke.
in the middle, but Miss, tell me her name again.
Golden Cooper.
Miss Golden Cooper, what a great name. Miss Golden Cooper is dynamic, and I really, really commend you all for hiring her. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
I second that.
That's great.
Okay, if there isn't any other public comment, no, can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Can we get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everybody.